The upcoming Suicide Squad game waves some massive red flags, Palworld teases a daring new trading card game, and Nicolas Cage comes to Baldur's Gate 3. I'm Ash Dixon, and this is GINX News. We're just 4 days away from the release of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and it's right about now that our website team would be posting the official GINX review. The problem is, it seems Warner Brothers Games have decided to just not send out review copies, and as soon as that happens, it's hard not to jump to a simple conclusion. They're trying to hide something. After all, from its initial reveal, the game has caught a bad rep that it can't seem to shake, mostly because it's yet another live service game. And a lot of people are suspecting it's a response to the recent previews that, to put it lightly, didn't go down very well. There were a few positive articles, but the main narrative was that this game was dead on arrival. It didn't help that even the likes of IGN trashed the game, a website that's known for being a little too forgiving sometimes. They've also kicked up a fuss about not getting a review copy, but to be honest, I don't think it's personal, as it seems basically no one has got one. And maybe it's some kind of double bluff. After the poor reviews, they lifted the NDAs for general players, and suddenly there were a whole load of people on social media singing its praises. Don't get me wrong, that was by no means universal, but there was definitely a contrast from the reviewers. Ultimately, I think it's just a case of waiting for the release, and I certainly wouldn't recommend pre-ordering it. I've always got the impression that Rocksteady are trying their hardest to make this a good game, but due to certain executive decisions made years ago, that's become an incredibly difficult, if not impossible, task. I'm curious what you think though. Have you given it a go? Do you plan to pick it up on Friday? Do let us know in the comments. Oh, and I wanted to use this opportunity to thank every single one of you. On Friday, we reached 1,000 subs, and I was riding that high all weekend. I know we're still a very tiny channel, but we pour a lot of love into these shows, and seeing those regular faces in the comments is honestly so cool. So thank you for being here, and if you're new, there's still time to subscribe and be like, oh yeah, I found that GINX News channel before it blew up. We all know the Palworld hype train is going to die down at some point, because while the game is good, it's not second most sold game on Steam ever good. Either way, the game itself is clearly not running out of its own steam. Over the weekend, it hit a new all-time concurrent player peak of 2.1 million, so people are clearly invested, and the devs seem keen to make the most out of their moment in the spotlight. Because over on Twitter, CEO Takuro Mizobe has teased PAL figurines and what looks to be a new trading card game. There's no info on when this stuff will be available to buy or for how much. In fact, going by the visible lines on the PAL figurines, I'd guess these are 3D printed prototypes as opposed to final products. But what I am way more interested in is this card game, because if you've watched a lot of GINX News, you'll know I'm a bit of a TCG fan, and right now, I'm loving me some Pokemon. Now, initially, my assumption was that these would be collectible cards that would come with the figurines as a novelty, and that's what I think these cards are on the bottom row. But looking at the 2 rows above, that's where things get really interesting. Because again, these might just be for show, but the various symbols and attributes point to an actual game being designed here. And I think everyone's first assumption is that these will just be a rip-off of Pokemon cards, so let's just have a closer look and see if we can work out how they might actually play. The top 3 cards look the most basic, which makes sense as they're the starter pals. In the top corners, you've got the attack and defense values, and under their portraits, you've got a card type. They also have the same basic description text, translating roughly to call a friend. But it's the 5 cards underneath that give far more clues about potential mechanics. On the bottom left, it seems there's a cost value for each PAL, and they seem to correlate quite consistently with the power level of the cards. In addition to the attack and defense values, it seems some PALs have additional symbols. Relaxarus, for example, has a couple of apples under its attack. Perhaps this indicates some kind of lifesteal mechanic, where if it attacks for 4, it gets 2 life back. Meanwhile, Univolt has 3 boot symbols under its defense, so maybe those represent damage it can dodge before an attack actually lands. At the top of the portraits, these 5 cards also seem to have a weight value, which might play into how cards are prioritized on the board, or maybe the order of attack. And each of the 5 cards have text boxes with unique effects. I put Pingulets through Google Translate, and it roughly spat out, open the top 2 pieces of your mountain map and put 1 piece on the gravesite. Now, that translation is probably way off, but my guess is that it's a simple draw 2, discard 1 effect. And from that analysis, it doesn't look very reminiscent of Pokemon cards. Outside of the different types, which, let's be honest, every card game has, there's no energy costs or high HPs. If anything, it looks like it uses a similar framework to Magic, having single-digit attack defense values and some kind of land resource to play your cards. Which is a little disappointing, as it's a formula that basically every modern card game seems to use. You know, Hearthstone, Lorcana, they're all quite similar. But also, it's tried and tested, and I 100% get steering clear of the Pokemon TCG. Designing, manufacturing, and evolving a card game is a huge resource-intensive task in itself, but then again, they've sold over 8 million copies, so they can clearly afford to do it if they wanted to. Either way, what do you think? Would you play a Palworld TCG? Which mechanics would you like to see? Let us know your thoughts and speculations in the comments. We're running a little low on time now, but that's exactly what the quickfire round is for. Guess who just killed a boss in Elden Ring? I'm gonna bet you didn't guess a goldfish named Tortellini. It belongs to Twitch streamer PointCrow, and well, just have a look.
One more hit, he's staggered! One more hit, Tortellini! One more hit, Tortellini! One more hit! Tortellini, please stop healing! You don't have any heals! Let's go!
That's right, PointCrow allocated commands to areas of the fishbowl, and Tortellini the goldfish ended up defeating Godric the Grafted through the power of swimming. Which is pretty awesome because Godric is the second main boss of the game. He was later interviewed by gaming insider Jake Lucky. The streamer was interviewed, not the goldfish. And it turns out that he got the inspiration from this video where some fish played Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Although, hilariously, in that case, the game crashed, leading to the fish revealing and using the owner's credit card live on stream. So yeah, some people might say it's all just pot luck. I prefer to live in a world where goldfish can be skilled gamers and sea creatures can accurately predict World Cup football games. Rest in peace, Paul the Octopus. Now, if you thought programming commands for goldfish to play games was a waste of time, spare a thought for redditor Jerkislow, who's ruined all of your favourite Baldur's Gate 3 characters. He's done so by replacing their faces with that of one Nicholas Kim Coppola, or as he's more commonly known, Nicolas Cage. In a post called Cage Invasion, Jerkislow has given the Cage makeover to Gale, Minsk, Hausen, Jaheira, and a load of others too. And yep, they've even ruined some of the characters that we all try to romance. So here's Shadowheart. Thanks for ruining my latest goth girl crush. Guess I'm going back to the Hex girls. Astarion has been turned into a hot mess, and not in a good way. And Karlach, well, goodbye mummy dom vibes. Unfortunately, or thankfully, depending on your point of view, this is not a mod and simply a bit of Photoshop or AI at work, but knowing the internet, it's probably only a matter of time. And that's the show. A like is always appreciated. You can catch Friday's video right about here, and we'll be back tomorrow for even more gaming news.